So, hello everyone, and welcome back again to the Mycetoma Research Club. In today's session, we will be having Dr. Hatim Sati, who's from the World Health Organization, joining us to give us a presentation and an overview about the WHO Fungal Priority Pathogens List and the Fungal Priority Pathogens List Implementation Blueprint. Dr. Hatim, he's a public health professional specializing in antimicrobial resistance, and he worked for the Pan American Health Organization. Then he joined the WHO headquarters in 2020. Currently, he leads the antimicrobial resistance priority setting for research and development and innovative public health interventions at the WHO. He led the development of the WHO's first fungal priority pathogens list and the 2024 bacterial priority pathogens list. And he's currently leading the development of the fungal priority pathogens list blueprint. Dr. Hatim, Prof. Fahal, do you want to add something?
Thank you very much, Samira. Really, I'm very much pleased and honored this afternoon to have Dr. Hatim Sati. Dr. Hatim Sati is a young Sudanese graduate. Then he joined a lot of international organizations. Now he's a leading figure in the area of fungal infections and antifungal resistance. And this is an area which is badly neglected by the international community. Very few people talk about antifungal resistance and how that can impact the life of a lot of people around the globe, especially with the era of the COVID, era of the immunocompromised diseases, and patient being prolonged staying in the intensive care, where a lot of patients are missed of having fungal infections and having a proper treatment for these fungal infections. So Hatim, we are very pleased to have you as a young scientist, a leading figure right now in the area of the implementation of the WHO antifungal and implementation of the blueprint for the fungal infection in the WHO in Geneva. Really, we are very honored, and we are looking forward for close collaboration with our group here and for the international community at large. Thank you very much, Hatim. The floor is for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Fahal, for the kind invitation. It's a true honor, really, to come before you today, and a giant figure in this area and in the area of addressing neglected diseases at large. As Professor Fahal mentioned, today I'll be presenting a bit on the WHO Fungal Priority Pathogens list and some of the work we're doing to develop a global strategy or a blueprint. This vital initiative currently is under development, and it aims to address the pressing issue and the escalating really issue of invasive fungal disease and antifungal resistance. This work is I'm privileged to have the honor to do this work, but this work is really led through a valuable input from and strategic advice from a broad advisory group of experts, including Professor Fahal and others, representing all WHO regions and ensuring a collaborative and well-rounded approach. And so it's my pleasure to share the strategic approach and provide some updates on the project. I'm happy to engage and take any questions and brainstorm really with you on the future direction in this area. I have no conflict of interest to declare. I'm a civil servant at the WHO full-time. This is an overview of my presentation. I'll start with a walk through the foundational elements that guided this blueprint idea or work, starting with the background and the rationale behind pursuing such strategy. And then I'll touch on our objectives, target audience, and the approach that we are following in the development of this document. And then I'll present some of the updates and take questions. As you may all know, in response to the escalating challenge of invasive fungal diseases, the WHO in 2022 published the first fungal priority pathogens list to guide research and development and public health action. And the list featured 19 pathogens aligned in or classified into 3 priority tiers, critical, high, and medium. Some of these pathogens are associated with invasive disease, systemic disease, or most of them. Some are rare molds, some are enteric, and some are globally distributed. And while the feedback for the list has been overall really positive, we realize and acknowledge that the report associated with the list was limited in terms of the scope of the recommendations. And in the fungal priority pathogens list report, we highlighted several key areas for action, focusing on public health, the need for surveillance, and the need for more investments in the area of research, basic research, but also research and development of new tools and new measures to address invasive fungal disease and antifungal resistance. And so with these recommendations, we try to advocate for more resources internally and externally to address this issue. And while these recommendations were broad, we now have a shared understanding that a more structured and detailed stepwise WHO guidance is needed for the implementation of targeted prevention and control measures to address this issue. And so our objective through the follow-up of the fungal priority pathogens list, let's say the blueprint, is to develop and prioritize implementation framework to address fungal diseases and antifungal resistance, focusing as a starting point on top priority pathogens. And through this work, we really aim to identify key gaps and opportunities in the current landscape and define the most important actionable interventions that can result in the short to the intermediate term in a paradigm shift in the response to these infections. As Professor Fahal rightly mentioned, this area has been largely neglected for a very long time, with some studies putting only 1%, a little over 1% of the global funding for infectious diseases going into the area of medical mycology. The situation is even worse in low and middle income countries. And so through this blueprint, our end goal is to move the needle in terms of strengthening the global response to these threats. Through this work, we also aim to lay the foundation for a sustainable long-term WHO global strategy and or even better program to effectively combat these threats. Our target audience through this work is national and regional policymakers, including those responsible for communicable diseases and AMR prevention and control, researchers, developers of antifungal medicines and diagnostics in the private and public sector, research funders and public-private partnerships that are focused on communicable diseases R&D, and the global decision makers, health providers, and patient advocates. And if you notice here, we are targeting a broad number of stakeholders, including the private sector, particularly to address the near dry antifungal pipeline. The antifungal pipeline, in its current situation, there are roughly 8 to 9 candidates in clinical development between stage 1 and stage 3 in development. And this is a very scant pipeline compared to say, anti-cancer pipelines or pipelines aimed to address autoimmune diseases. At any given point, these pipelines has thousands of candidates across clinical development. And big part, of course, of the issue around the scant pipeline and the limited investments in new antifungals revolves around the major scientific and financial challenges. You know, in terms of the scientific challenge, as you all know, fungi are eukaryotics, and that leaves very limited number of targeted or targets inside these cells where developers can work on without harming the human cells. There's also issues with the complexity around clinical trials, and I know that Dr. Fahal and his group fully understand these challenges. With most of these patients are difficult to recruit. A lot of them are immunocompromised, have comorbidities, pre-treated, and the cost of these trials also overall is high, and so there is the scientific challenge, the challenge in terms of recruitment and clinical trial design and ability to truly reach conclusions through precise endpoints. And then last but not least, there is also the bottom line. A lot of investors perceive this area as an area of limited return on investment, and this is why a lot of these investments has been or has ceased or driven away, and this is a problem in terms of the development of antimicrobials at large, not only unique to antifungals. In terms of our approach, we are following a structured, scientific, yet collaborative process. This approach was designed to ensure that the final framework is effective, realistic, scalable, and inclusive. The approach also stresses on the stepwise implementation and acknowledges the varying capacity across the globe between countries, and also the varying burden of disease across diverse economic settings. These are the steps followed in the development of the implementation report. We began by forming a WHO steering group which oversees and guides the project. Next, we developed concept notes, and we relied on evidence from the literature and the background work we've done in the development of the priority pathogens list. We then put these evidence and these assumptions or these concept notes for review by peers and by experts through a series of technical sessions, including an in-person session during the ACMED conference in April of 2024 in Barcelona, Spain. We then identified over 120 global experts from across all WHO regions and across the disciplines that I mentioned, from physicians to researchers, private sector developers, public sector developers, experts, and so forth. And we engaged them through a series of virtual roundtables over the summer. 8 roundtable discussions were held, and we gathered insights and a lot of input from these experts, particularly where data gaps existed. This then continued with the synthesis of this input into a framework. This is an assessment framework in which we identified targeted actions and potential interventions, and we started prioritizing these interventions based on their feasibility. And so it was a feasibility assessment exercise to prioritize interventions to produce something that is, as I mentioned, realistic and scalable. And this, of course, was followed by an in-person meeting, which I'll come to. These are the 4 primary domains of the framework for the blueprint. The first domain is the public health domain, or public health interventions at large. The second domain focuses on existing and emerging therapies and technologies and access to these new and existing tools. The third domain focuses on laboratory and surveillance capacity building. And lastly, the domain number 4 focuses on social determinants of health, climate change, and One Health. Of course, it's important to note that all these priorities and actionable interventions under each of these domains rely on strong governance, accountability, and partnership, something that we wanted to think about early on. Who owns this inside the different or various public health entities nationally and globally? Who should be held accountable, and what kind of partnerships are potentially could be in place to bring about true change in the response to these neglected diseases. Similarly, at the top, as you can see, a cross-cutting theme is the theme of investments in research, innovation, knowledge transfer, and investments in all sort of new technologies across the board. And then under each of these domains, there are a number of subdomains. And as you can see, some of these domains are more expansive than others, with the public health domain perhaps being the broadest, as it covers many interventions ranging from awareness raising to educational interventions, antifungal stewardship, etc. And as you can see, domain 2 emphasizes, as I mentioned, the investments in research and development and innovation and so forth. Following the synthesis of the evidence and the formation of the feasibility framework assessment, we held a technical consultation meeting in Istanbul in October of 2024, with the participation of 50 experts and partners, including representation from the Mycetoma Center. Professor Fahal was part of these deliberations. Participants also included representatives from Africa CDC, US CDC, European Union HERA, ESHAM, Gavi, patient advocacy groups, and various societies and WHO regional offices. The primary goal of this technical consultation meeting was to review and refine and identify the priorities and actual interventions, and sort of scrutinize the assessment we did in terms of the feasibility of these interventions in the short and intermediate term, following clear operational definitions. During the meeting, we focused on ranking the elements to ensure alignment with the objectives. And also, as I said, scrutinizing the preliminary feasibility assessment. At the end, the experts, of course, played a critical role in identifying gaps, suggesting re-ranking of interventions, and offering feasibility insights and revisions supported by evidence in terms of the interventions. And as a result, a new framework emerged with a number of interventions that we believe really representative of what could be a scalable and realistic blueprint or strategy to start with. Finally, the group also highlighted key research areas or priority research agenda for further exploration to strengthen the response to invasive fungal disease and antifungal resistance. This is the WHO steering group. The group has overseen, of course, the development of this work and the revision of the proposal, and will continue to guide the project moving forward. And the group constitutes of colleagues from various institutions across all WHO regions, but also colleagues from within the WHO various programs like the Neglected Tropical Disease Program and the HIV program and the AMR surveillance team. The assessment group chairs also were selected to facilitate the discussion among the 50 senior experts who convened in Istanbul. This is a photo of the expert group that participated in the meeting, and a few of the experts also attended online. They couldn't attend in person. And this is a word cloud showcasing some of the responses from the participants in the exit survey of that technical consultation. And so the next steps now is after the consultation, we'll continue to engage additional stakeholders. We just got or started the process to engage partners in the private sector to ensure inclusion of their input and perspectives into this blueprint. And we're currently drafting the blueprint, and the final blueprint is aimed to be published once reviewed by the expert group in late Q1, early Q2 of 2025. This will be followed, of course, by piloting and monitoring the impact. So far, we already have few countries who expressed, or regions expressed interest in piloting some of these interventions, including countries like Brazil, Pakistan, Japan, and the region of the Americas at large. And so in conclusion, the FPPL and other WHO effort are valuable, but the growing threat of fungal diseases and antifungal resistance remain underaddressed and requires a paradigm shift in the global response, or calls for a paradigm shift in the global response to these challenges. And these shifts call for a stepwise approach, acknowledging that transformative change requires time and must be pursued through a phased and coordinated and scalable approach. Priority setting is key, identifying and prioritizing interventions, knowing that countries are oftentimes overwhelmed with competing priorities, and therefore this must be kept in mind. The blueprint is hoped to lay the groundwork for a future sustainable and long-term global strategy, WHO global strategy, to effectively combat antifungal disease, antifungal threat. And with that, I conclude. Thank you very much. This is a list of donors that we want to acknowledge: the US CDC, EU, HERA, through their generous financial support. This effort was possible. Also, the over 150 experts who contributed their time, expertise, and insights to shape the FPPL Implementation Blueprint. And I want to acknowledge here my colleague Dana Lastrui, who has been working with me as the chair for the FPPL Advisory Group since 2022. And she really has been instrumental in helping us in terms of convening experts and in the process of consensus building throughout. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hatim, for this nice presentation. It was really informative. And thank you so much for shedding lights on this topic. Now the floor is open for questions and comments.
Yes, Samira?
Yes, Prof.
First, I would like to congratulate Hatim for this nice and elegant presentation. Very concise, very clear, and the objective was very nicely presented in this presentation. Again, that will show how we can do things, how we can plan things, how we can plan our work to be done. A very smart objective, very clear methodology, and very clear expected outcome and impact of this work. So I think the first lesson from this presentation, it is how we can plan to conduct our work, how we can produce our document, and how we can document this work. And the second issue I would like to mention here, this is the importance of recognize fungal infection as neglected diseases. WHO has many collaborative centers around the globe, and there is only 3 centers collaborating with WHO on fungal infection. The Mycetoma Center is one of them. And again, that will show that there is very few people around the globe working on fungal infections. Fungal infection is a serious problem, especially now, as I mentioned, with the area of COVID, viral infection, HIV, and all these will make the patients are very much susceptible to fungal infections. And at the end of the day, very few people recognize fungal infection as a cause of morbidity in the intensive care units. By the time they recognize that, almost the patient is not there or at the end of his road. And again, this is the cause of high morbidity and mortality in the intensive care units at this site. Hatim, you are taking a very the lead for a very important subject, neglected, and I think your work will going to make a lot of contribution to the human health in general. And thank you very much for this presentation. Thank you, Hatim.
Thank you, Professor Fahad.
And I think, sorry, I just one comment that if you look into the number of mycologists and those interested in mycology around the globe, there are very few. In Africa, there are very few. In Sudan, for example, there are very, very few people interested or expert in the area of fungal infection. The same as other African countries. We have the mycology, the African Medical Mycology Society, but again, there are very few. Rita in Nigeria is leading this group, but again, the number of people involved are very few, and actually it's not very active as it should be. Thank you very much.
Lemis, I see that you have a raised hand, so you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Hatim and Professor Fahal, for this lovely session. And I heard you saying, Dr. Hatim, that the pipeline for the discovery for new antifungals is almost dry. So I was wondering, does the WHO have any schemes of supporting, maybe laboratories or people working on designing new antifungal molecules, or because most of these are just done in academia and they need really some more funding and some more help in really upscaling these molecules, and helping them really see the daylight.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is indeed a very good question. As I mentioned, this issue of challenges in terms of financing and the lack of interest in research and development is a problem that is impacting antimicrobial development at large, even antibacterials. At the moment, if I remember correctly, there is only 36 antimicrobial candidates across the pipeline. And we run these annual analyses in our team to sort of assess the quality of these candidates in terms of novelty, focusing on innovation, what we call innovation criteria, new class, new mechanisms of action, evidence of no cross resistance, and new target. And at the heart of this, as I said, is the broken economics. Most of the big pharmaceutical companies moved out of this space, and this effort is mostly led by medium and small size enterprises and academic institutions. And so we've been pushing to work with partners and with governments to sort of develop in a bundle of push and pull incentives to bring in more investments in this area. Push incentives, what we mean by push incentives is any incentives that you can apply once the drug is close to the market, where you can streamline red tape, regulatory hurdles, etc. And what we mean by pull incentives is cold cash funding for either supporting the development of a promising candidate that has novel mechanisms of action, let's say, or to also incentivize some of these new drugs once they came to the market. And there are a number of schemes that are proposed for pull incentives, including, for example, guaranteed payment, expansion of exclusivity vouchers, etc. In the case of antifungal, antibacterial candidates, there are also a number of WHO partners who are working with WHO in this area. An important player in this landscape is GARD-P. It's a private-public partnership that was developed by the WHO, and they receive a lot of funding from various entities and governments, including the EU and the UK government, to actually bring candidates to the market. And they've done successfully or taken few candidates across the finish line in the last few years, and they have number of promising candidates. You can go and check their portfolio. And this is an entity that is focused only in the clinical phase of development. In terms of the early hits and early preclinical development, and as you know, this is referred to as the valley of death, where most of these proposals or concepts will never come to see the day of light or move to the clinical development side. And there is where a lot of struggle happens. A lot of researchers struggle to get funding for the proof of concept and proof of viability. And so there is another partner, and that is CARB-X. CARB-X is focused on the preclinical phase of development. Unfortunately, both of these partnering entities are focused at the time being on antibiotics mostly. They moved also into considering some phage therapy endeavors or programs. And we are trying now to make the case to expand some of this funding through CARB-X for preclinical trials for antifungals and GARD-P. And they are open. They are open to the idea. It's just that the scant pipeline is not very encouraging to them. And as Professor Fahal mentioned, the number also of researchers who are interested in this area is little. Perhaps it's catch-22. have very little to start allocation of funding in the basic research area. And you know that there is no interest from the private sector, and so a lot and also the mycology field itself is a neglected field, and so this does not leave or does not yield a lot of attempts or a lot of proposals for these kind of entities to try and consider this area. But yeah, this is definitely a big challenge, Lamis.
If I can expand on that, so I'm talking about myself personally. So in my PhD, I've designed a novel group of compounds that have been proven to have very good activity against mycetoma and also good activity against other fungi. They also have significantly less cytotoxicity compared to other antifungals. So where can someone like me go? Like where can you go to, to show the WHO or to show the WHO partners, of this work and maybe get support on helping advancing it further?
Yes, I think there are numbers of opportunities and venues, and I'll be very happy to guide you or give you some ideas. To start, today was, and I don't know if any of you heard about this or attended the session that took place earlier today. There's a session for a round of funding call for the Fail-Safe grant. The Fail-Safe grant is a grant that is funded by a number of governmental and non-profit entities in the UK. And there are two levels of the grants. There's a smaller grant of the value, I think, is up to 100 K. 75,000, yes, and there is the medium and large grant. This is one option, but really the really important, and if you truly would like to pursue this, you need to think about this idea of fundraising or investment raising. And there are a number of conferences that are specialized in this area. For example, there is the Beam Alliance conference in Basel, Switzerland, which will take place in a few weeks. And what the Beam Alliance is an alliance of antimicrobial developers who come together to and bring into the table big pharmaceutical companies, some of these private and public partnerships that I mentioned, governmental agencies that WHO is invited. And it is the biggest, I mean, not in terms of size, but it is perhaps the most intense setting where I have witnessed young researchers of all sorts making pitches to their products and submitting proposals, whether it's abstracts or proposals for talks. And there there are scouts. There are actual company scouts who come and they are very experienced and can pick a good proposal. And so it becomes a question of trying to pursue more innovative and also entrepreneurial mindset in terms of funding your research. It doesn't have to always be through academic mechanisms or governmental mechanisms. I mean, the private sector is also a very good landscape to pursue. But I'm happy to brainstorm further with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Hatim. Thank
you. Hatim, there's a question in the chat from Lubna. She's asking about any promising treatment or strategies to be developed to overcome the antifungal resistance?
There, as I mentioned, the pipeline is near dry. However, within that scanty pipeline, there are a number of really promising candidates. Few came to the market, two, I think, over the last 2 years, and currently there is one that is being developed by, I think, FG2. This is a company that is founded, and an example, Lamis, of how you can pursue this kind of endeavors with an entrepreneurial mindset. This was a compound that was developed by John Rex, and I don't know how many of you know John Rex, but if you're interested in this, I can also invite, with the permission of Professor Fahal, of course, John to give a talk here. John Rex truly developed a novel compound that is now being considered for an orphan drug status by the US FDA, and it's in quick route or quick track for approval. And he just raised in the last round of fundraising close to 300 million in funding to bring this across the finish line. So the pipeline is definitely scanty, but there are few novel candidates that are promising in terms of treating challenging infections, in terms of efficiency and safety and effectiveness. But in terms of also other measures to prevent antifungal resistance, as you all know, there are various drivers for antifungal resistance, and this is part of our work in the AMR division. We are focused on addressing AMR through 5 strategic objectives, and that is raising awareness, infection prevention control, stewardship, and surveillance, and finally making the case for investments in all of the above and R&D. And so one of the challenges or unique challenges of antifungal resistance is that the occurrence of this resistance across the One Health spectrum, which requires involvement of more sectors beyond the human health sectors and into the environmental sector and agricultural sectors. Big driver of antifungal resistance, of course, is the excessive use of antifungal analogs as fungicides in mass production of produce. And this problem is very unique because unlike the injudicious use of antibiotics in the animal health sector, and some injudicious use in agriculture, where you can with certainty say there is no added value, do not use antibiotics for animal feeds. And there's a lot of progress that happened through this, through some number of interventions in this work. Here, there is a true dilemma because there is a true need for fungicides for food security, and it's an issue that is linked to big industries and even country GDPs. And so, as you may know, 85% of plant pathology is fungi related. So there is a legitimate need to use fungicides. However, the drivers for antifungal resistance in agricultural sector is also further complicated by the low ceiling or low requirement for fungicides to pass approval. The EPA, for example, the environmental agency in the US, has very low ceiling for medicines and substances, or lower ceiling for these medicines that are used for plants and animals than the high threshold for the ones used in human health. And so just to give you an example, the very compound I described that was developed by John Rex and his colleagues is now under threat of cross-resistance because a Japanese company produced a similar compound that has been already approved for mass use in agriculture. And so cross-resistance is now a threat for new novel antifungals before they even come to the market. So it's a very complex issue, and we are trying to address it. And one of the unfortunate also realities is that we cannot address such a problem alone as the WHO. It has to go through the quadripartite secretariat that involves the FAO and the environmental agencies, and must consider, as I said, food safety and unintended consequences to economies.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hatim, for this. Actually, has been a lot in highlighting that some compounds are under development while others have already been developed. I think this is great. So, Professor Fahal, would you like to add? Because I was preparing a presentation about the fail-safe funding that Dr. Hatim has mentioned. But
I think that will be a lot of on the plate for today. We can leave it for the next meeting, your presentation, Samira.
okay.
Because we enjoy very much Hatim presentation. New ideas, new avenues, new promises that we can work together so as our young colleagues, they can work with Hatim for more projects, more activities, more funding, and more good science. Hatim was always trying to help. Hatim is always trying to help the Mycetoma Center at this hard time. He did a lot of work. He had a lot of communication with a lot of funding bodies, a lot of donors, a lot of scientists trying to raise fund and awareness about the mycetoma problem during this very hard time. We are very grateful for you. We are very grateful for you, Hatim, for this effort and this hard work you are doing in spite of your very busy schedule running from here and there. But we are very happy that we are working together, and hopefully your hard work will be very successful and the outcome will be very useful for the patient of mycetoma, not in Sudan, but around the globe.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Fahal. And really, it's just the least we can do to ensure that this legacy and this fantastic work you've started by all metrics, by all measures, is continued. And really, I'm delighted, and it's a pleasure really always to provide any help we can and engage also just with exchanging ideas and brainstorming with the colleagues. Definitely, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hatim, very much. Thank you.
I think we're almost coming to an end. Thank you so much, Dr. Hatim, for joining us today. And I would like to thank our dear audience who joined us. Thank you so much. And until we meet again in another session of the Mycetoma Research Club. Dr. Hatim, if you want to add anything, feel free.
Thank you. Thank you, Samira, for your fantastic moderation and coordination. And thank you, colleagues, for your time. And pleasure to be here. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and have a wonderful time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.